Have you ever felt truly forgotten, like a page torn from a book, a memory wiped clean from the world? This isn't just my story. It's the story of a ghost, a man who was erased, left to dissolve into the scorching sand under a merciless sun. They thought I was gone. They prayed I was dead. But a promise, whispered in the dark, has a way of keeping a soul tethered to this earth. My name is Alex Rourke, and I have come back from the grave to collect a debt. The sand. I still feel it sometimes. Not the gentle kind you find on a beach where children laugh and build castles. No, this was sand that burned. Sand that got into your eyes, your mouth, your soul. It was the sand of the Khitan Desert. We called our outpost the Oasis, a cruel joke for a collection of dusty tents and a concrete bunker surrounded by nothing but 1,000 miles of emptiness. Our unit, the Sand Vipers, was a family, a band of 12 brothers bound not by blood, but something stronger, trust. There was Mike, Joker Chen, who could make you laugh even when the temperature hit 120 degrees. Ben Rook Petrov, a giant of a man, with a heart even bigger. And our leader, Commander Marcus Thorne. He was more than a commander. He was our father figure. His voice, steady and calm, was the anchor in every storm. He promised us every single day, no man left behind. We look out for each other. We are the Vipers, and we strike as one. I believed him. We all did. We would have followed that man into the gates of hell itself. And as it turned out, that's exactly what we did. The mission was called Operation Sand Viper, classified, top secret. Thorne gathered us that night, his face lit by the flickering light of a single lantern. The air was thick with tension and the smell of dust and diesel. "Men," he said, his voice a low rumble, "intelligence has located a high-value target, a weapons facilitator holed up in a fortress deep in the canyons. Our job is to go in, secure the facility, and retrieve a specific hard drive. This drive contains information that could save thousands of lives back home. It's a dangerous mission, but it's the reason we're here." Joker, ever the light, smirked. "Just another walk in the park, right, Commander?" Thorne didn't smile. His eyes, usually so warm, were like chips of flint. "This is different. The rules of engagement are changed. This is a ghost op. No one knows we're here. No backup is coming. Our success and our survival depends on absolute silence and absolute obedience." A cold trickle of fear ran down my spine. Ghost op. It meant if we were caught, our government would deny we ever existed. We were shadows. But we trusted Thorne. He had never led us astray. The night of the operation, the moon was a sliver of silver, offering no comfort. We moved through the canyons like whispers, shadows among shadows. The target building was ahead, a dark square structure carved into the rock face. It was too quiet, the kind of quiet that screams. Rook looked at me, his massive frame tense. "Doesn't feel right, Alex," he muttered. I nodded, my grip tightening on my rifle. Stick to the plan, in and out. We breached the door. The inside was dark, empty. No guards, no target, just rows of empty crates. And then the world exploded. It wasn't gunfire from an enemy. It was an explosion from above. The roof caved in. Concussion grenades blinded and deafened us. In the chaos, through the ringing in my ears, I heard Thorne's voice on the comms. But he wasn't shouting orders. His voice was calm, cold. "Primary objective complete. The package is secure. Initiate cleanup." Cleanup? Through the dust and smoke, I saw him. Commander Thorne, standing at the entrance we had just breached. He wasn't looking at the chaos, at his men stumbling, choking. He was looking at a small device in his hand, the hard drive. And then he looked directly at me. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, I saw it. Not the father, not the leader. I saw a stranger. I saw nothing. Then he turned and walked away. "Thorne!" I screamed, but my voice was lost in the roar of a second, larger explosion. The world turned to fire and pain. A searing heat, then crushing weight, then nothing. I don't know how long I was out. Minutes? Hours? The first thing I felt was the pain. A fire in my leg, my side. The second thing I felt was the sand. It was in my wounds, grinding with every shallow breath I took. I was buried under rubble, pinned by a fallen beam. The air was thick with the smell of blood and cordite. I heard moans, whimpers, the sounds of dying men. "Joker!" I croaked. "Rook!" A weak cough came from my left. It was Rook. He was trapped under a concrete slab, his face a mask of dust and blood. "Alex, you're alive," I gasped. "Thorne, he left us." Rook's eyes, wide with pain and betrayal, found mine. The hard drive. It was the only objective. We were the cleanup. The truth was a physical blow, worse than any shrapnel. We weren't soldiers on a mission. We were loose ends, pawns to be sacrificed in a game we didn't even know we were playing. Rook's breathing became ragged. "Alex, promise me. Promise me they won't get away with this. They called us heroes, but they treated us like trash. Promise me." I looked at my friend, my brother, as the life faded from his eyes. The big man, the rock of our unit, was broken. And it wasn't by an enemy bullet. It was by the man he trusted most. I reached out, my fingers barely brushing his. "I promise, Ben. I promise. They will pay. All of them." That was the last thing he heard. My promise, whispered in the ruins of a tomb built by our own commander. I don't know how I survived. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was that promise. Local nomads, scavengers found the site days later. They pulled me from the rubble. My body was shattered. My leg was a mess of broken bone and torn flesh. My face, let's just say I wasn't the man I used to be. The Alex Rourke that entered that canyon died there. What emerged was something else. Something forgotten. Something hungry for justice. The official report, I later learned, stated that the Sand Vipers were lost in action during a heroic engagement with enemy forces. A tragic loss. Commander Marcus Thorne was hailed as the sole grieving survivor. He received a medal for valor. He was a hero. But heroes don't leave their men to die. And I was the forgotten soldier, and I was just beginning to remember what I was capable of.
The path back to the world of the living is a long and lonely one, especially when you no longer belong in it. The nomads who found me, they had no love for my government or for Thorne's. They were outcasts, like me. They nursed me, set my bones with ancient methods, and fed me a diet of broth and bitterness. For a year, I existed in a haze of pain and memory. The face I saw in a shard of broken mirror was not my own. It was a roadmap of scars, a permanent mask of the betrayal I had endured. My left leg, badly damaged, left me with a permanent limp, a constant, physical reminder of that night. But my body was healing. My mind, however, was a different story. It was a fortress, and its only occupant was revenge. I spent my days rebuilding my strength, and my nights planning. I had nothing. No money, no identity, no friends. I was a ghost. But a ghost can move in ways a man cannot. I learned things in that desert. Patience, silence, how to become part of the shadows. I learned that Thorn hadn't just retired after his hero's welcome. He had cashed in. He'd left the military and used his newfound fame and connections to build a private security empire, Thorn Solutions. It was a multi-million-dollar company, contracted by governments and corporations worldwide. He was no longer a soldier. He was a businessman, a philanthropist, a pillar of the community. He lived in a gleaming penthouse, a king in a castle of glass and lies. And he wasn't alone. Through whispers and careful, secretive research, I pieced it together. The mission, Operation Sandviper, was a sham. There was no high-value target. The hard drive we were sent to retrieve didn't contain enemy intelligence. It contained evidence. Evidence of a secret illegal weapons deal Thorn and a few other high-ranking officials were involved in. We were sent in to be the patsies, the fall guys. If we died, the mission failure would cover their tracks. Our deaths were not a tragedy. They were a business expense. The other men involved, they were powerful now. There was General Arthur Davies, a decorated war hero who oversaw our unit's command. He had signed off on the mission. And there was Carter Shaw, a slick, ruthless corporate broker who facilitated the weapons deal. Thorn, Davies, Shaw. The three architects of our betrayal. They had grown rich and powerful, standing on the graves of the Sandvipers. The fire of vengeance burned in my chest, but I knew I couldn't charge in. I was one broken man against a fortress of wealth and influence. I needed a new weapon. Not a gun, but an identity. Using skills I'd acquired in the underworld of the desert, I created a new man, a ghost with a name. Kale. A freelance security consultant, specializing in high-risk environments. It was a dark irony that I would use the very skills Thorn had taught me to destroy him. I built a digital footprint, a sparse but credible history. I was a phantom, but to the world, I looked real. My plan was simple. I wouldn't kill them. Death was too quick, too merciful. I would destroy them. I would take everything they had built with their blood money, their wealth, their power, their reputations. I would expose them to the world and let the justice they had escaped finally claim them. I would make them feel the same utter powerlessness that Mike, Ben, and all the others felt in their final moments. I was coming home. Not as Alex Rourke, the forgotten soldier, but as Kale, the man who would make them remember. My first stop was the city they now called their kingdom, a place of shining towers and deep shadows. I stood across the street from the headquarters of Thorn Solutions, a 50-story monolith of steel and ambition. My body ached with a familiar pain, a phantom echo of the canyon. I watched employees stream in and out, little ants serving the queen of their hill. And then I saw him, Marcus Thorn. He stepped out of a black luxury car surrounded by eights. He was older, his hair grayer, but he carried himself with the same easy authority. He was smiling, shaking hands, the picture of success. He looked happy, content. The sight of that contentment, built on the bones of my friends, was like a punch to the gut. The rage I had kept on a tight leash threatened to break free. I saw Ben's face. I heard Joker's laugh. Just breathe, Alex, I told myself. The predator does not roar before the hunt. He waits. I turned my attention to the others. General Davies was now a frequent talking head on news networks,
a military analyst who preached about honor and duty. He lived in a heavily guarded estate outside the city. Carter Shaw was the hardest to pin down, a snake who preferred the cover of his private clubs and offshore accounts. 3 targets, 3 different fortresses. I needed a way inside, not through the front door, but through the cracks. Every fortress, no matter how strong, has a weak point. You just have to find it. For Thorne, it was his ego. His company was his legacy. He believed it was impenetrable. For Davies, it was his reputation. He craved the respect and admiration of the public. And for Shaw, his weakness was greed. He was never satisfied. My plan began to take shape, a 3-pronged attack. I would infiltrate Thorne's company, dismantle Davies's public image, and bankrupt Shaw's operations. I would turn them against each other, make them paranoid, make them see enemies in every shadow. I would be the ghost in their machine, the splinter in their mind. My first move was Thorne's company. They were bidding on a massive government contract, one that would cement their dominance for years to come. It was his pride and joy. I needed to get close to that bid. I needed to get inside. I used my Kale identity to land a low-level consulting gig with a small IT firm that was a subcontractor for Thorne Solutions. It was a foot in the door. A tiny, insignificant crack. But sometimes that's all you need to bring down a wall. My first day walking into that building, my heart was a drumbeat of pure adrenaline. The air was clean, sterilized, so different from the dust of the desert. People rushed past me, talking about meetings and deadlines, completely unaware that the man limping past them in the cheap suit was a walking corpse with a single purpose. I was in the lion's den, and the lion had no idea I was there.
Infiltrating Thorne Solutions was like walking through a museum of my own nightmare. The walls were adorned with glossy photos of heroic operations, sanitized and glamorous. In the main lobby, there was even a small, tasteful memorial for the Sand Vipers, a plaque with our names. My name was there. Alex Rourke, killed in action. I stood before it one day, my hands clenched in my pockets. They had built a shrine to the men they murdered. The hypocrisy was so thick I could taste it, like ash in my mouth. My job was mundane, data integrity checks for the network supporting the big government bid. It was boring, invisible work. Perfect. I was a digital janitor, and no one pays attention to the janitor. I kept my head down, my voice quiet, my limp pronounced. I was harmless, forgettable, just like they thought I was in that canyon. But while my body was checking server logs, my mind was mapping the entire company. I planted tiny, almost undetectable pieces of code, listening devices in the digital bloodstream of the corporation. I learned everything. I knew about Thorne's secret meetings, his off-the-books accounts, his dirty little deals. I learned that the guilt, or what passed for it, didn't keep him up at night, but the fear of losing it all did. He was paranoid about corporate espionage, about rivals. Good. Paranoia makes people sloppy. I also watched him, from a distance, through office windows, on security feeds I now had access to. I saw the man he had become. He was colder, sharper than the commander I remembered. The fatherly warmth was a tool he used now, not a genuine emotion. He was a brilliant CEO, a ruthless businessman. The same skills he used to lead men to their deaths, he now used to build his empire. One evening, working late, I found myself alone on his executive floor. I stood outside his office door, a slab of polished dark wood, a symbol of his power. My key card, which I had modified, clicked the lock open. The office was vast, with a breathtaking view of the city. On his desk, in a place of honor, was a framed photo. It was of the Sand Vipers, all of us, arms around each other, smiling in the sun outside the oasis. We looked so young, so trusting. I picked it up, my scarred fingers tracing the glass over my own face, over Ben's, over Mike's. The rage was a living thing, coiling in my stomach, demanding I smash the photo, trash the office, leave a message. But that would be a mistake. That was the anger of Alex Rourke. I needed the cold patience of Kyle. I put the photo back exactly as it was. The greatest insult I could deliver was to be in his sanctum and leave no trace I was ever there. I was a ghost, and he was about to learn you can't fight a ghost. While I worked on Thorne from the inside, I began my external attacks. I decided to start with Carter Shaw, the broker. His world was money, a world built on confidence. Destroy that confidence, and his house of cards would fall. Using the information I was siphoning from Thorne's systems, I discovered a series of illegal payments Shaw had made to foreign officials, payments Thorne and Davies knew about. It was the perfect weapon. I couldn't go to the police. Thorne and Davies had too many friends in high places, so I had to be more creative. I became a ghost in Shaw's world, too. I created anonymous online identities, whispering campaigns. I sent carefully crafted, untraceable emails to his biggest clients, hinting at an imminent government investigation into his finances. I leaked fragments of financial data to rival brokers, suggesting Shaw was insolvent. At first, nothing happened. The world of high finance moved slowly, but then the whispers became murmurs, and the murmurs became shouts. I watched in real time as Shaw's digital life began to crumble. Clients started pulling their accounts. His stock price began a slow, then rapid decline. He was frantic, making calls, sending threatening emails. He knew he was under attack, but he had no idea who or why. He reached out to Thorne. I listened to their call on a tapped line. Shaw's voice was shrill with panic. "Marcus, someone is coming for me. They're destroying me." Thorne's voice was calm, dismissive. "Carter, get a hold of yourself. It's probably a competitor. You're being paranoid. Just tighten your security. You don't understand. They know about the Khitan payments. They know." There was a long silence on Thorne's end. I could almost feel the chill through the phone line. "What did you say?" Thorne's voice was now a deadly whisper. "The Khitan deal. Someone knows. This isn't a coincidence, Marcus." That was the moment. The first crack in their alliance. Thorne was now worried. The past, the thing they had buried in the sand, was clawing its way back to the surface. Shaw was the first domino, and he was teetering. A week later, the news broke. Carter Shaw's company was under formal investigation for fraud and money laundering. His assets were frozen. His reputation was in tatters. He was finished. I watched the news report on a screen in a public square. People shuffled past, barely noticing the fall of a wealthy man. There was no satisfaction in it, no joy, just a cold, grim necessity. One down. But Shaw was just the financier. The two men who had held the knives, who had looked us in the eye and left us to die, were still standing. The game was afoot, and they were finally starting to feel the chill of a presence they thought they had erased forever. The forgotten soldier was reminding them he existed.
With Carter Shaw's empire in ruins, I turned my attention to General Arthur Davies, the war hero, the man of honor. His fortress was his reputation, a gleaming citadel of medals and television appearances. To bring him down, I wouldn't attack his finances, I would attack his legacy. I would show the world the rot beneath the gold braid. Davies was a frequent speaker at military charities and universities. He loved the applause, the respectful silence when he spoke of duty and sacrifice. He had even written a book, a bestseller called The Code of a Soldier. The irony was enough to make me sick. I knew the truth. I had the evidence. Buried in Thorne's servers were scanned copies of the original mission briefing for Operation Sandviper, the one Davies had signed. And next to it, buried even deeper, were the real orders, the ones that outlined the true illegal objective. Davies' signature was on both. My plan was a piece of psychological warfare. I wouldn't release the documents to the public, not yet. First, I wanted to break him, to make him feel the same fear, the same paranoia that was now eating at Thorne. I started small. I hacked into the teleprompter at a major veterans gala, where he was the keynote speaker.
As he stood at the podium, smiling, ready to deliver his speech about honor, the words on the screen changed. Instead of his prepared remarks, it read a single line over and over. "You left them to die in the sand. The sand vipers remember." Davies stared, his smile frozen, then shattered. He stammered, lost his place, and had to cut his speech short. The audience was confused, whispering. They thought the great general was getting old, perhaps a bit senile. The next strike was more personal. I sent a package to his home. Inside was a single, worn dog tag. It was a replica of Ben Rook Petrov. There was no note, just the dog tag. Let his imagination do the work. Let him wonder who sent it, how they got his address, what they knew. I watched him through the long-range lens of a camera from a building across from his estate. He received the package, opened it, and dropped the tag as if it were white-hot. He spun around, looking out his window, his face a mask of sheer terror. He was a man seeing ghosts. He called Thorne immediately. This time, the conversation was not dismissive. "It's happening to me now, Marcus," Davies hissed, his voice trembling. "Someone was at the gala. They sent me Petrov's tag." "Calm down, Arthur," Thorne said, but his voice lacked its usual steel. "It's a prank, a sick prank from a rival." "A prank? It's not a prank, Marcus. It's someone who knows what we did. It's him. Marcus, we didn't get them all." "We didn't get them all." The words hung in the air, a confession whispered over an insecure line. My blood ran cold. They had wondered, they had worried that maybe, just maybe, one of us had survived, and now their worst fear was confirmed. "Don't say another word," Thorne snapped. "Not over the phone. We meet. My office, tonight." The trap was closing. They were turning on each other. The trust that had bound them in their crime was fraying, replaced by a frantic, self-preserving fear. The final blow to Davies was more public. I anonymously leaked a heavily edited but devastating audio clip to a notorious investigative journalist. The clip was from my tapped line of Davies saying, "We didn't get them all." It was played on a primetime news show. The context was missing, but the guilt in his voice was palpable. The media, which had once adored him, now swarmed like piranhas. Questions were asked. His past was re-examined. The official story of the Sandviper's last mission was suddenly under a microscope. He was forced to resign from his board positions, his book was pulled from shelves, the war hero became a subject of scandal and suspicion. I watched him on television one last time, standing on the steps of his home, surrounded by reporters. He looked old, broken. The confident general was gone, replaced by a hollow, terrified man. "I have no comment at this time," he mumbled, shielding his face from the cameras. "I have served my country with honor." Honor. The word tasted like poison. He was finished. His reputation, the thing he valued most, was dust. 2 down. Only the king remained. Marcus Thorne was now isolated. Shaw was disgraced and under investigation. Davies was a public pariah. And Thorne knew he was next. His company was his life, his validation. It was the monument he had built to prove that his betrayal was worth it. I was going to take it from him. The final stage of my plan was in motion. The government contract bid was due in 48 hours. Thorne Solutions was the front-runner. Winning it would save his company from the growing scandal surrounding his former associates. Losing it would be a catastrophic blow. I had spent months inside his system, and I knew the bid inside and out. I knew its strength, and more importantly, I knew its fatal flaw. Thorne, in his arrogance, had based his entire proposal on a proprietary security algorithm, an algorithm he had stolen from a small, innovative tech startup years ago, driving them into bankruptcy. I had the evidence, the original code, the emails discussing the theft, everything. On the night before the bid was due, I worked late again. The office was silent. This was it, the final move. I accessed the master server for the bid proposal. With a few keystrokes, I replaced his stolen algorithm with a corrupted, useless version. Then I packaged all the evidence of the theft, the emails, the code, the documents linking it directly to Thorne into a single file. I set 2 delayed emails. One was to the government review board with the evidence attached, set to send 5 minutes after the bid deadline passed. The other was to every major news outlet in the country, set to send 1 hour after that. I leaned back in my chair in the dark, silent office. It was done. The ghost had done his work. The machine was set in motion. Tomorrow, Marcus Thorne would watch his world collapse, and he would know, in his heart, exactly who was responsible. He had forgotten the soldier, but the soldier had never forgotten him.
The day of the bid announcement was meant to be a coronation for Marcus Thorne. I made sure I was there, in the back of the crowd of employees gathered in the main atrium to watch the live stream from the government building. The air was thick with anticipation. Giant screens were set up, showing a bland official logo. Thorne stood on a small podium, smiling, confident, ready to give a victory speech. He looked out over his empire, his people. He had no idea that the man who had built the bomb was standing in the very back, watching him with cold, dead eyes. The government official appeared on screen. He gave a long, boring speech about procurement and value. Then he came to the announcement. And after a thorough and rigorous review process, the official said, adjusting his glasses, the contract for the National Security Data Grid is awarded to Aegis Dynamics. Silence. A stunned, absolute silence. Thorne's smile didn't just fade, it shattered. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Aegis Dynamics? They were a minor competitor. It made no sense. Then the official continued, his face grim. This decision was made in part due to serious and credible evidence of corporate espionage and intellectual property theft presented to this committee concerning the former frontrunner Thorne Solutions. An official investigation has been opened. The room erupted into chaos. Gasps, shouts. Reporters who had been tipped off by my second email began swarming the building, their cameras flashing. Thorne stood on the podium, utterly exposed. The confidence was gone, replaced with a look of dawning, horrific comprehension. He wasn't looking at the screens anymore. He was scanning the crowd, his eyes wild. He knew. This wasn't bad luck. This was an attack. A precise, surgical strike. Our eyes met across the crowded room. For a second, everything else faded. The noise, the chaos, the flashing lights. It was just him and me. The betrayer and the betrayed. The king and the ghost. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just held his gaze. And I let him see the man he had left for dead in the desert. I let him see Alex Rourke. I saw the recognition dawn in his eyes. The disbelief, the shock, and finally, the fear. Pure, undiluted fear. He took a step back, as if he'd been struck. He knew. I turned and walked away, melting into the panicked crowd as the first news alerts began to blare on phones, announcing the scandal that would destroy Thorne Solutions forever. His company, his legacy, his everything was gone. The fallout was swift and brutal. Thorne was arrested within hours. The evidence I provided was irrefutable. Facing multiple life sentences for treason, fraud, and his connection to the deaths of the Sandgeipers, his lawyers began negotiating a plea deal. I didn't attend the trial. I didn't need to. But I did watch the video of his confession. He was led into a courtroom, a broken man in an orange jumpsuit. The powerful CEO was gone. This was just a hollow shell. Under oath, he told the whole story. The illegal weapons deal, the fake mission, the decision to sacrifice his men to cover their tracks. He named Davies and Shaw as his co-conspirators. He spoke of the guilt that had haunted him, the fear that had consumed him when Davies and Shaw fell. He confessed to everything. When the judge asked him for a final statement, he looked directly at the camera as if he knew I would be watching. I thought I could bury the past, he said, his voice a broken whisper. I thought I could build a new life on top of the graves. But the past, it doesn't stay buried. I left a man for dead in the desert. But I was wrong. I didn't leave a man. I left a conscience. And it came back for me.
He was sentenced to life in a maximum security prison. Davies and Shaw received similar sentences. Their empires were gone. Their names were mud. They had lost everything. I stood on a quiet beach, far from the city, the gentle sand a world away from the burning dunes of Khitan. The wind off the ocean was cool and clean. The chapter was closed. The promise I made to Ben Petrov was kept. But as I looked out at the endless gray water, I felt no triumph, no victory, only a profound, echoing emptiness. The fire of revenge that had kept me warm for years had gone out, and I was left with the cold ashes of my old life. I had destroyed the men who broke me. But I was still broken. Alex Rourke was still dead. The ghost, Cale, had no purpose left. So who was I? The war was over, but the soldier was still lost.
What is the cost of revenge? It's a question I've asked myself every day since the cameras stopped flashing and the courtrooms fell silent. I had won. Justice, in its own raw, imperfect form, had been served. The world knew the truth about the Sandvipers. We were no longer forgotten. Memorials were rebuilt with the true story etched in stone. The families of my brothers finally had closure. They had answers. I met with them, after it was all over. I used what was left of the money I'd acquired during my time as Cale to set up trusts for the wives and children of Mike, Ben, and all the others. I sat with Ben's mother, a sweet, frail woman with his eyes. She held my scarred hands and cried. "Thank you, Alex," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing my boy home." And in that moment, I felt a flicker of something. Not the cold satisfaction of revenge, but the warm glow of peace. This was what it was for. Not for my rage, but for their memory, for their honor. But for me, the path forward is less clear. I live a quiet life now. The ghost of Cale has been retired. And Alex Rourke, he's a complicated figure. To the world, he's a survivor, a hero who brought down corrupt men. But when I look in the mirror, I still see the scars. I still feel the weight of the sand. I still hear the promise I made in the dark. Revenge, it's a poison. You drink it, thinking it will kill your enemy, but it ends up changing you. It hollows you out. I became a monster to destroy other monsters. I used their own methods: deception, infiltration, psychological warfare. I became the very thing I sought to destroy. Is that justice? Or is it just a more sophisticated form of betrayal? I don't have the answer. Maybe there isn't one. So, what is the lesson in my story? Is it that revenge is sweet? No, I can tell you, it is not. It's bitter. It's ash. The lesson is about betrayal. Betrayal isn't just an action, it's a seed. When someone you trust, someone you would die for, turns their back on you, they plant a seed of darkness inside your soul. You can let that seed grow into a forest of hatred, a consuming fire that burns everything in its path, including yourself. That's what I did. Or you can choose a different path, a harder path. You can take that betrayal and use it to remind yourself of what you will never become. You can honor the memory of the good by refusing to let the evil change your core. I failed that test. I let the betrayal define me. I let it twist me. I became a ghost, a weapon. And while I achieved my goal, I lost a part of my humanity in the process. The true victory wouldn't have been in destroying Marcus Thorne. The true victory would have been in finding a way to heal, to live a good life despite what he did to me. That is the harder fight. The forgotten soldier shouldn't have sought to become an avenging spirit. He should have fought to become a man again. My war is over, but my journey back to the light is just beginning. It's a longer, harder road than any I walked in the desert. But I have to believe it's a road that leads somewhere worth going. If you take anything from my story, let it be this. When you are wronged, do not let the wrong define you. Do not let the darkness of others extinguish your own light. Justice is necessary. But vengeance is a shadow that follows you long after the battle is done. Choose the light. Always choose the light. I am Alex Work. I was a forgotten soldier, but I will not be a ghost anymore.